They say some rooms are best left undisturbed, especially room 13. This room, shrouded in mystery and fear, has a history that sends chills down the spine of anyone who dares to speak of it. The stories that circulate about room 13 are not just tales told to scare children. They are accounts of real experiences, terrifying encounters that have left a mark on those who have dared to enter. The old, creaking hotel stood tall and imposing against a fog-shrouded forest. Its windows, like dark, hollow eyes, seemed to watch every move of those who approached. The building itself was a relic of a bygone era, its walls whispering secrets of the past. The fog that enveloped the forest added to the eerie atmosphere, making the hotel appear as if it were floating in a sea of mist. The locals avoided it, and travelers who stumbled upon it often left with a sense of unease, feeling as though they'd been watched by unseen eyes. Inside, the air was heavy with decay and whispering footsteps. The once grand hallways were now filled with the scent of mold and rot, the wallpaper peeling away to reveal the scars of time. The floors creaked under the weight of memories, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. Every corner of the hotel held a story, every room a secret. The lobby, once bustling with life, now stood empty and silent, a ghost of its former self. Sarah, a fearless journalist, dared to spend a night in the infamous Room 13, haunted by a restless spirit. She had heard the stories, the warnings, but her curiosity and determination to uncover the truth drove her forward. Armed with her camera and a notepad, she was ready to document any paranormal activity she might encounter. Sarah had always been fascinated by the supernatural, and this was her chance to experience it firsthand. As darkness fell, silence suffocated the hotel. The once faint whispers grew louder, and the air grew colder. The silence was not just an absence of sound, it was a presence, a heavy, oppressive force that seemed to press down on her. The hotel, which had seemed merely old and decaying in the daylight, now felt alive with unseen energies. The shadows deepened, and the sense of being watched grew stronger. Armed with a flashlight and a notepad, Sarah entered the dimly lit room. The door creaked open, revealing a space that seemed frozen in time. The room was small, with a single bed, a dresser, and a chair. The wallpaper was faded and peeling, and the air was thick with dust. Sarah's flashlight cast long, eerie shadows on the walls, and every step she took seemed to echo in the silence. She could feel the weight of the room's history pressing down on her, and she knew she was not alone. Peeling wallpaper, dust-covered furniture, and a sudden chill that sent shivers down her spine. The temperature in the room seemed to drop suddenly, and Sarah could see her breath in the air. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the cold, but it seemed to seep into her very bones. The room felt alive with a presence, something unseen but undeniably there. She could feel eyes on her, watching her every move. She set up her camera, determined to capture any paranormal activity. The camera's red light blinked on, casting a small, comforting glow in the darkness. Sarah positioned it to cover as much of the room as possible, hoping to catch any movement or anomalies. She checked her notepad, making sure she had everything she needed to document her experience. She was ready for whatever might come, or so she thought. Suddenly, a disembodied voice echoed, "Leave her! Leave now!" filled with menace. The voice was low and guttural, sending a wave of fear through Sarah. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the room with its ominous presence. Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she had just heard. Was it a trick of her imagination, or was there truly something in the room with her? Her heart pounded, but she stood her ground. She had come here for a reason, and she wasn't going to let fear drive her away. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The voice had been terrifying, but it had also confirmed what she had suspected. There was something in room 13. She was determined to find out what it was, no matter the cost. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The sudden loss of light was disorienting, and Sarah felt a wave of panic rise within her. She fumbled for her flashlight, her hands shaking. The darkness was complete, swallowing up everything around her. She could hear her own breathing, fast and shallow, and the pounding of her heart in her ears. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing in from all sides. A cold draft swept through, and her flashlight was dead. The chill was bone deep, and Sarah shivered uncontrollably. She tried to turn on her flashlight, but it wouldn't work. The batteries were fresh, but the light refused to come on. She was plunged into darkness, with only the cold and the silence for company. The sense of being watched grew stronger, and she could feel eyes on her, unseen but undeniably there. Panic set in as footsteps approached. The sound was unmistakable, the slow, deliberate tread of someone walking towards her. Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. She was alone in the room, but the footsteps were real. They grew louder, closer, and she could feel the presence of someone or something drawing near. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she felt a wave of fear wash over her. Then the lights flickered back on. The sudden return of light was almost blinding, and Sarah blinked, trying to adjust. The room was empty, but the sense of presence remained. The footsteps had stopped, but she could still feel the eyes on her, watching her every move. She looked around, trying to find the source of the footsteps, but there was no one there. The room was as it had been, but the atmosphere was charged with tension. The room was empty, but the chilling whisper lingered. The voice was faint, almost a sigh, but it was there. Sarah strained to hear, trying to make out the words. The whisper seemed to come from the walls themselves, filling the room with its eerie presence. She felt a shiver run down her spine, and she knew she had to leave. The room was not safe, and she could feel the danger growing with every passing moment. Shaken, Sarah gathered her things, vowing never to return. She packed up her camera and notepad, her hands shaking. The experience had been more than she had bargained for, and she knew she had to get out. She could still feel the eyes on her, watching her every move. The sense of presence was overwhelming, and she knew she had to leave before it was too late. She hurried out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. The next morning, she overheard staff discussing the recent death of a guest in room 13. The news hit her like a punch to the gut, and she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The guest had been found dead in their bed, their face contorted in terror. The details were chilling, and Sarah felt a cold dread settle over her. The experience she had had in room 13 was not just a figment of her imagination, it was a premonition of the guest's fate. A young woman found dead in her bed, face contorted in terror. The staff spoke in hushed tones, their faces pale with fear. The details were gruesome, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The young woman had been found with her eyes wide open, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. The cause of death was unknown, but the fear on her face was unmistakable. Sarah knew that the spirit in room 13 was real, and it had claimed another victim. Sarah's blood ran cold. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks, and she felt a wave of fear wash over her. The experience she had had in room 13 was not just a figment of her imagination, it was a premonition of the young woman's fate. The spirit in the room was real, and it had tried to warn her. She felt a shiver run down her spine, and she knew she had to leave the hotel as soon as possible. Her haunting experience wasn't imagined, it was a premonition of the woman's fate. The realization was both terrifying and sobering. Sarah knew she had been lucky to escape with her life. The spirit in room 13 was real, and it had tried to warn her. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, but also a lingering fear. The experience had changed her, and she knew she would never forget the night she spent in room 13, stepping into the sunlight. She felt like a pawn in a sinister supernatural game. The warmth of the sun was a welcome relief, and she felt a sense of freedom wash over her. The experience had been terrifying, but it had also been enlightening. She had faced her fears and survived, and she knew she was stronger for it. As she walked away from the hotel, she felt a sense of closure. The spirit in room 13 had tried to warn her, and she had listened. She knew she would never forget the experience, but she also knew she would never return. The haunting of room 13 was a chilling encounter, but it was one she had survived.